My brother trashed Grandma's house while living rent-free. Now he wants it in his name, but I had other plans. He didn't expect what happened next. I will tell you how everything unfolded. Before then, we share stories like this every day. If you love them, don't forget to subscribe. We are on a journey to our first 1,000 subscribers. Thank you for subscribing. Kindly leave a comment telling us where you are watching from. We'd love to stay connected. Now let's get into the details of the story. I hadn't been back to Grandma's house in over a year, not since the hospital visits turned routine and then suddenly final. The place sat on the corner of a cracked cul-de-sac in central Pennsylvania, boxed in by overgrown hedges and a drooping front porch. As I stepped out of the car and took in the sagging gutters and half-dead lawn, it hit me how far it had fallen. It used to be the heart of our childhood. Now it looked like it had given up, too. Kyle was supposed to take care of it. That's what we agreed on. He'd moved in after Grandma was moved to assisted living, promising to mow the lawn, fix the leaky sink, keep the place in order. I should have known better. Kyle never stuck to anything unless it came with free beer or borrowed money. Still, I'd held out hope, maybe for Grandma's sake more than mine, that he'd finally step up. But hope is a stupid kind of blind. I unlocked the front door and was hit with a wave of stale air, like wet ashtrays and mildew. The place reeked. The curtains were stained yellow, likely from smoke. A broken lamp lay sideways on the floor. I stepped around it and noticed the coffee table was covered in empty cans, ash, and what looked like a half-eaten pizza hardened into cardboard. My chest tightened. This wasn't just neglect. This was destruction. Kyle had turned Grandma's home into a dumping ground. He came stumbling down the stairs, shirtless and blinking like the sun offended him. "Yo," he mumbled, scratching at his jaw. "Didn't know you were coming today." His voice was dry, defensive, like I was the one out of place. I stared at him, then past him, toward the upstairs hallway, where water damage curled the ceiling like paper. "Looks like you've really been looking after the place," I said, not bothering to hide the edge in my tone. Kyle shrugged. "It's just old. Place was already falling apart, man." He leaned against the banister, not noticing or not caring that it wobbled beneath him. I took a deep breath and forced myself not to say what I was thinking. I needed to see the rest of the damage first. I needed to know just how deep the rot went, because it wasn't just the house that was falling apart. Something told me Kyle's life was unraveling, too. I just didn't know how far. The kitchen was worse. The linoleum was peeling in corners, the sink full of brown water and flies. Grandma's fridge magnets were still on the door, but they'd been rearranged into curse words. I stared at them for a second, wondering if she'd notice from wherever she was now. I opened the fridge and gagged at the smell. Something had definitely died in there. I slammed it shut and turned to Kyle. "You really think she'd be okay with this?" I asked. He scoffed. "She's dead, dude. What does it matter?" He said it like he was stating the weather. No emotion. No guilt. That's when I felt it. Something cold and quiet cracking inside me. He didn't deserve to be here. He didn't deserve to have this place. I clenched my jaw and forced a nod. "Right," I said. "Just old memories." But even as I said it, I knew I wasn't letting this go. I wasn't walking away like last time. Upstairs wasn't better. The wallpaper in Grandma's bedroom had been torn down halfway, revealing mold beneath. Her old sewing machine sat in the corner, covered in dust and spilled beer. I stepped into my old room, expecting nostalgia. Instead, I found boxes. Opened, rifled through, stuff missing. My childhood baseball glove. Gone. The bookshelf bare. A flicker of heat moved up my spine. Kyle didn't just neglect the house. He'd picked it clean, pawned the soul of it for whatever quick fix he needed that week. I walked back downstairs, my hand brushing the banister Grandma used to polish every Sunday. I could almost hear her humming in the kitchen, the clatter of her rosary beads on the counter. Those sounds were ghosts now. And Kyle had spit on every one of them. He was sprawled across the couch, already cracking open another beer. "So," he said, grinning without humor, "you gonna stay a while? Or just here to check up on me?" His eyes were bloodshot. Challenging. "I'm just here to see the house," I said carefully. "Get a feel for what needs fixing." He laughed, a short, sharp sound. "Yeah? You fixing it? Or trying to take it?" That told me everything. He knew something. I kept my face blank and let the silence stretch. Finally, I said. Just here to help, Kyle. That's all. He nodded like he believed me. But I could see it in his eyes. He didn't trust me. And now I didn't trust him either. He disappeared into the garage, and I took the moment to look around the living room. That's when I saw it. An old shoebox wedged behind the couch. I pulled it out. Inside, there was a mess of junk mail, crumpled receipts, fast food wrappers. And near the bottom, a stack of letters. The return address caught my eye immediately. James Ellison, Estate Law. My heart picked up. I thumbed through them. All unopened. One was addressed to me. I held it like it might burn me. I turned the envelope over in my hand, heart racing. Why hadn't Kyle given me this? What was he hiding? The seal was untouched. Clean. I hesitated for just a second, then tore it open. I only read the first line before I heard the door creak behind me. Kyle's voice came sharp. What the hell are you doing? I stood slowly, letter in hand, my face blank. Cleaning up your mess, I said. But in my chest, something darker stirred. This wasn't just about a house anymore. The letter shook something loose in me. It was neatly typed, formal and sterile like all legal documents. But the words underneath carried weight. Grandma had left the house to both Kyle and me, not just one of us. There was a clause. Neither of us could sell, gift, or transfer ownership without the other's signed consent. A mutual tether. I stood in the living room rereading it until the print blurred. It was her way of forcing us to cooperate. Or maybe her way of punishing us both. I slipped the letter into my jacket as Kyle re-entered the room, still chewing something greasy. He didn't notice my change in posture. He rarely noticed anything outside himself. You find anything good? He asked, gesturing toward the open shoebox. Just junk. I lied. He chuckled and plopped down on the couch, flicking on the TV like we weren't sitting in a war zone. My eyes drifted back to the mess, beer cans, ashes, the worn couch we used to watch cartoons on. It all felt like a bad dream. I waited until the next morning to visit the lawyer's office. James Ellison, Estate Law, was a gray building tucked between a vape shop and a pawn store fitting. The secretary gave me a once-over like I was late to my own funeral, but Ellison ushered me in with a polite smile. You must be Matthew, he said. His office smelled like old paper and coffee. I was wondering when you'd show. That told me everything. Kyle had been here first. I sat down and asked the question I already knew the answer to. Yes, your grandmother left the house to both you and Kyle. Ellison confirmed, pulling out the file. And yes, Kyle inquired about assuming full ownership. He adjusted his glasses and gave me a tight smile. He wasn't happy when I told him he couldn't do anything without your signature. I nodded slowly. Has he tried to change anything? Forge anything? Ellison raised an eyebrow. Nothing I can prove. But he was persistent. I thanked him and left. Outside, the wind felt sharper than it had the day before. Back at the house, Kyle was in the driveway, shirtless again, working on a car that hadn't run in years. I approached with the letter in my pocket, my jaw locked tight. You already talked to Ellison, I said. He looked up and grinned. Yes, so? I stared at him. So you tried to cut me out. He stood and wiped his hands on his jeans. Man, come on. You don't even care about this place. You haven't set foot here in a year. He wasn't wrong. But something about the way he said it made me want to rip his teeth out. I care now, I said simply. He scoffed. Little late for that. Then he turned back to the engine like the conversation was over. I didn't press. I just walked away, letting the silence stretch between us. Kyle was arrogant. And arrogance makes people sloppy. He thought I'd cave, sign whatever he handed me just to avoid the hassle. But I wasn't here to avoid anything. I was here to watch him unravel. And if he didn't give me the tools, I'd dig them out of the dirt myself. I started combing through the house, quietly, carefully. Kyle wasn't the type to keep his skeletons hidden well. Upstairs in what used to be Grandma's sewing room, I found a filing cabinet stuffed with unpaid bills, loan reminders, and threats from various payday loan companies. One envelope was red-stamped in bold, final notice. Another had been torn open, then hastily shoved back in. I unfolded it. It was an official letter from the county. Past due property taxes. Another letter sat beneath it, this one from a rental agency. The words stopped me cold. Notice of eviction, non-payment. My fingers tightened on the paper. The date was 6 weeks old. Kyle hadn't paid utilities. He hadn't paid the taxes. And according to this, he defaulted on some rent-to-own appliance deal Grandma must have signed before she passed. I laughed under my breath. He'd been drowning and pretending to float. The house wasn't just wrecked. It was on the edge of being taken from both of us. And he hadn't said a word. I confronted him that evening, holding the eviction notice in one hand. "What the hell is this?" I asked. He barely looked up from his phone. "Nothing. They're just trying to scare me." I shook the paper. "They're threatening repossession." He shrugged. "So? They won't actually do it. It's just some boilerplate crap." I stared at him in disbelief. "You haven't paid taxes. You haven't paid utilities. This place is one notice away from being condemned." He finally looked at me, smirking. "Good luck proving that's my fault." That was the moment I stopped feeling guilty. Grandma always said Kyle had a silver tongue and a rusted soul. She'd hoped he'd grow out of it. But some people don't grow, they decay. I left the notice on the table and walked upstairs, fist clenched, heart pounding. Kyle thought he backed me into a corner. But what he didn't realize is that corners give you leverage. And I was done playing his quiet brother. I was going to collect every mistake he made and bury him in it. That night, I started a digital folder, timestamps, photographs, audio clips. I photographed the eviction notice, the property tax letters, even the stained mattress he'd dragged into Grandma's room. Every broken hinge, every rotting corner, I documented it. I started calling neighbors. Some remembered Kyle throwing late-night parties. One mentioned unfamiliar cars pulling up at odd hours. Another talked about loud arguments, sometimes even shouting matches in the driveway. I took notes. Kyle wasn't just irresponsible, he was reckless. And soon, I'd have enough proof to make that matter. In the garage, I found a box of old electronics. At the bottom was an old burner phone. Dead, dusty, but intact. I charged it overnight, half hoping it was just junk. The next morning, the screen blinked to life, no passcode. Inside were dozens of texts, names, numbers, Venmo requests, threats. I didn't recognize all the names, but the tone was clear. Kyle owed people. Dangerous people. I smiled, darkly. He'd handed me the rope. All I had to do now was wait until he tightened it around his own neck. The house didn't just smell like rot, it was rot. Kyle had infected it with his decay, and the deeper I dug, the more it spread. I started in the garage, thinking I'd find junk, maybe more empty beer boxes. Instead, I found a folding table covered in faded green felt, 2 mismatched chairs, and cigarette burns forming a ring in the concrete floor. A cooler of melted ice sat in the corner. The kicker was a small, dented cash box with poker chips and sticky bills. Kyle wasn't just squatting, he was operating. Illegal poker. Out of Grandma's garage. I should have been shocked, but I wasn't. It made sense in a sick, Kyle kind of way. Always hustling, always corner cutting. I took photos of everything, close-ups of the chips, the box, the beer labels. I even found tally sheets stuffed behind the water heater. Names, numbers, buy-ins. Some were written in shaky handwriting, others in thick permanent marker, like Kyle had started letting the guests keep score. I created a folder in my phone. Evidence, Kyle. This wasn't just about kicking him out anymore. Inside, the investigation turned personal. The first item I noticed missing was Grandma's wedding china. Used to be in the hutch, white porcelain with hand-painted violets. She only brought it out for Christmas. I checked every cupboard, then the basement, and finally the attic. Nothing. Same with the antique cuckoo clock, her coin collection, and the hand-stitched quilt she made when we were kids. All gone. I cornered Kyle about it. He shrugged. She wouldn't care. Better than letting it sit there collecting dust. That was his idea of respect. I kept documenting. Every item missing, every lie told, every dollar likely pocketed. I recorded my own voice each night, logging what I found. Day 3. Confirmed the antique quilt was sold. Neighbors saw a buyer loading it into a van last month. My voice sounded cold, mechanical. But that was the point. I wasn't grieving anymore. I wasn't even angry. I was building a case. Kyle had spent his life escaping consequences. This time, I'd make sure they caught up to him and hit harder than he could run. I canvassed the neighborhood next. Most people didn't want to get involved, but a few spoke freely, especially when I mentioned code enforcement and the smell. Mrs. Talbot, next door, said she'd seen strange men coming and going at all hours, usually on weekends. One guy in a black SUV nearly ran over my cat, she said. Then he and your brother got into a screaming match. Real nasty. Thought they were going to throw punches. I asked if she remembered when. She did. I logged the date and time. That changed things. Poker games were one thing. Screaming matches with people who drove blacked-out Escalades? That was something else. I knew the type. Low-level bookies or enforcers, the kind of people who smile with their mouths closed. I'd seen it in the city. If Kyle owed them money and failed to pay, they'd come for whatever was left. That included the house. That included me. I realized then, I wasn't just protecting Grandma's legacy. I was protecting myself. Because if Kyle brought heat down, we'd both burn. And that gave me an idea. I knew Kyle's pattern now. Sloppy in the morning, half drunk by lunch, totally gone by midnight. I waited until he passed out on the couch with an open beer across his chest, then slipped into his room. His drawers were chaos, crumpled receipts, lighters, wrappers, some crushed prescription bottles. In the third drawer down, under a stack of casino flyers and unopened mail, I found it, a burner phone. Cheap plastic, already nicked and sticky. I clicked the power button and held my breath. It lit up. No password. Sloppy. There were dozens of texts. Most were vague. You got it. Money's short. We square after Friday. One stood out. If I don't see it by the 12th, I will come to the house. Don't test me. Another. You selling more from the place? My pulse kicked. Someone knew Kyle had been gutting Grandma's home. Worse, they expected more. I scrolled through names, initials only. J, TK, Roach. I didn't need full names. These weren't friends. These were wolves circling a wounded deer. And Kyle had blood on him. I screenshotted everything. Exported it to my laptop. Then I did something riskier. I responded to one of the older messages. Just one word. Soon. If they thought Kyle was still cooperating, they'd wait. That was all I needed. Time. Time to finish the trap. I wiped my fingerprints from the burner, put it back exactly where I found it, and closed the drawer. Kyle didn't stir. He muttered something in his sleep and rolled over. I stood in the doorway a long moment, watching him breathe. He looked like a child. Filthy, twitchy, pathetic. But behind that sleep was a man who had torn apart the only home we had left. Who sold our memories for a night's rush and handed our family name to debt collectors and thugs. And still, he acted like the victim. Like I was the intruder here. I stepped back quietly and shut the door behind me. The truth was, Kyle wasn't the only one running a game now. And mine was just getting started. The next day, I boxed up everything I'd gathered. Printouts of the text logs, photos of the poker setup, audio notes from neighbors. It looked like a case file. I added the eviction notice and the property tax letters. Then I wrote a letter of my own, to Ellison. I am documenting misuse and neglect of the property. I request temporary conservatorship pending legal review. I didn't know if it would stick, but I had a plan B and C. Kyle was going to lose this house. He just didn't know it yet. I told Kyle I'd sign the house over to him. Let the words fall like dead weight from my mouth. Flat, defeated, believable. His reaction was predictable. That smug, triumphant grin crawled across his face like a rash. Told you you'd come around, he said, clapping me on the shoulder. I flinched on instinct, but I played my role. I was the worn-out brother, too tired to fight, just looking to move on. We agreed on Friday, lawyer's office, 10 a.m. I even said I'd bring coffee. That made him laugh. He didn't see the blade I was sharpening. Once the plan was in motion, I worked fast. First, the burner phone. I made copies of every threatening message and every incriminating reply, then sent them, one by one, to the numbers Kyle had been dealing with. Anonymously, of course. I picked a free messaging app, masked the number, and wrote things like, "Ask Kyle where your money is. He's skipping town. Or he sold you out. Ask about Friday." It didn't matter if they believed it. What mattered was pressure, heat from every direction. Next, I called the county code enforcement office. I kept my voice low and calm, told them I was a neighbor. The house at 221 Crestwood Drive, it's in bad shape. Broken windows, unsecured trash, possibly some illegal activity. I didn't oversell it. I gave just enough for them to raise an eyebrow and put it on their radar. I wanted a report filed. I wanted a case number. The house was crumbling, Kyle was circling the drain, and I was greasing every will I could find to help push him under. Then came the wild card, his ex, Madison. She had a restraining order from last year. Kyle never talked about it, but I found the court papers buried under a pile of fast food receipts in the kitchen drawer. I called her from a payphone near the grocery store. "This is Matt, Kyle's brother. I'm not calling to cause trouble." Long pause. "I thought you should know. He's trying to get the house in his name. I figured you'd want a heads up, especially if he still owes you anything." I didn't ask her to do anything. I just lit the match. By Thursday night, Kyle was jittery. He tried to hide it, but I'd known him too long. He drank faster, smoked more. His laugh was too loud, his pacing too frequent. He'd gotten some calls, nervous glances at his phone, whispered curses in the hallway. "I heard. I told you it's handled," at least 3 times. The cracks were showing. He was unraveling. I kept smiling. "Tomorrow, man," I said, raising my beer. "One signature and you're free of me." He clinked the bottle against mine, eyes wild, mouth twitching. "Damn right," he muttered. But Friday wasn't the endgame. The real goal was to bury him under the consequences of his own greed. Signing the house over was never on the table, it was bait. If he got desperate enough, he'd slip. All I had to do was stay close, quiet, and let the panic do the heavy lifting. I locked away the originals of everything, the letters, the texts, the eviction notice, even the burner phone itself. I wrapped it in aluminum foil and stuffed it in the back of Grandma's old sewing machine. If he tried to torch the place, I'd still have proof. At 2 a.m., I woke to a sound I couldn't place at first, metal against wood. I sat up, heart thudding. Then I heard the creak of a window sliding open. I crept downstairs barefoot, every step a prayer that the floor wouldn't betray me. The kitchen window was cracked wide, glass shards on the linoleum. The back door swung slightly on its hinge. The house was being broken into, but not by a stranger. Kyle was gone. His keys were missing from the hook. So was the wrench he kept by the back door. Drawers were open, cabinets rifled through. He was looking for something. I moved through the room slowly, heart pounding. In the hallway, the closet door hung ajar, coats scattered. Upstairs, the attic hatch had been pulled down. I didn't go up. I knew what he was after. The phone, the letters, anything that could tie him to the poker games, the debts, the theft. But I was 3 steps ahead. Everything of value was already secured at a friend's place, including digital backups. Kyle would find nothing but dust and dead ends. I waited in the dark, crouched at the bottom of the stairs until sunrise. But he never came back. I checked the garage. His car was gone. The duffel bag he'd kept by the door was missing. A drawer full of his clothes had been yanked out and emptied. He'd run. Whether it was the loan sharks or the guilt or the sudden realization that he'd been outplayed, I didn't know. But I knew this. Kyle had disappeared, and the house wasn't safe anymore. I called the police and filed a break-in report. I left out the part where the suspect was my brother. I came downstairs and saw the kitchen window shattered. I think someone was looking for valuables. The officer nodded, bored, took a statement, a few photos, then left. As soon as the cruiser pulled away, I locked every door, every window. I changed the locks before noon. I didn't know when Kyle would come back, but I knew it wouldn't be with good intentions. At 9:43 a.m., Ellison called. "Matt, just checking in. I've got the paperwork ready. You and Kyle still coming in at 10? I exhaled through my teeth. "Only one of us will be there," I said. "And I won't be signing anything." There was a long pause. "Should I be concerned?" he asked. I shook my head. "No," I said. "You should be ready. Things are about to get complicated." Kyle showed up 25 minutes late to the lawyer's office. His lip was split, eyes swollen, and his right hand trembled when he reached for the door handle. He looked like he'd gone a few rounds with a brick wall and lost. "Got mugged," he muttered as he slumped into the seat across from me. I didn't flinch. Didn't ask who did it. Maybe one of the guys he owed. Maybe karma. Either way, I just sat there, calm as a lake in winter, and pushed the folder across the table toward him. Inside were the papers, thick, formal, official-looking. In reality, they were smoke and mirrors. I'd had a friend draft them up to look like a quitclaim deed, just legal enough to fool someone desperate. "All you gotta do is sign," I said. Kyle glanced at them like they were instructions to a bomb he didn't know how to defuse. "You sure?" He asked, voice low, eyes twitching. I nodded. I'm done fighting. You win, Kyle. He snorted, half a laugh, and picked up the pen with shaking fingers. He signed. No questions, no reading, no idea. Just a scrawl across the bottom line, Kyle R. Jennings. It felt anticlimactic, watching it happen. All that destruction, the lies, the broken furniture, the burnt memories, undone with a stroke of ink. The lawyer, Ellison, raised his eyebrows but said nothing. He flipped the document closed and offered Kyle a copy. Thanks for coming in, he said. Kyle grabbed the folder, smirking through the pain. Guess it's my house now, he mumbled. I didn't correct him. I just stood, buttoned my jacket, and thanked Ellison for his time. Outside, the air was warm and tight, like a storm about to burst. A siren wailed faintly in the distance. I walked to the curb like I had nowhere to be. Kyle limped behind me, humming some off-key tune under his breath. He didn't see the cruisers at first, 2 of them, parked at opposite ends of the block. When the officers stepped out, hands resting near their belts, Kyle stopped cold. What the was all he managed before they called his name. Kyle Jennings? We need to speak with you. He turned to me, eyes wide. What did you do? He asked, voice sharp with panic. I didn't answer. One of the officers stepped closer. You're under arrest for multiple charges: fraud, property destruction, illegal gambling, and violation of a restraining order. Kyle froze, mouth working like he'd forgotten how to form words. You set me up, he whispered. You lying piece of... He lunged, but they were faster. Hands behind his back, cuffs clicking into place. He shouted my name, called me every name in the book, even begged. I didn't respond. I just watched. As they read him his rights, I pulled the real deed from my jacket, jointly owned, just like Grandma had wanted. But now, with his arrest and the formal complaint I'd filed, I had grounds to petition the court for sole conservatorship. Ellison would handle it. By next month, Kyle's name would be a memory in ink. The rest, the evidence, the phone, the photos, was already submitted. It wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about permanence. Making sure this never happened again. Making sure Kyle never came back. After the cruisers pulled away, I stood on the sidewalk alone. The street was quiet again. The whole thing had taken less than 10 minutes. Funny how fast justice could work when you gave it teeth. I got into my car and drove back to the house, the one Kyle had tried to gut and claim and ruin. The house where Grandma taught me how to make apple pie, where she'd read bedtime stories with the windows open in summer. The one Kyle had treated like a dump. I still had the keys. I stepped inside just as the sun dipped low, casting a honey-colored glow across the ruined living room. The couch was still stained. The walls still smelled like smoke and mildew. But something in the air had shifted. The weight was gone. I walked through the room slowly, taking it all in. The damage, the silence, the bones beneath the mess. This place had taken a beating, but it was still standing. And now, so was I? Stronger, meaner maybe, but cleaner. I'd scrubbed the rot out by the root. I went to the garage, the scene of Kyle's dirty empire, and flipped the light switch. The bulb flickered once, then buzzed to life. The poker table was gone, tossed out days ago. The cooler, the chips, the burn marks, they'd be next. I opened the side door and let the night air in. Then I grabbed a broom and started sweeping. Not because it needed it, though it did, but because I needed it. I needed to take something broken and begin the process of making it whole again. I worked until my arms ached, until my shirt clung to my back and dust coated my throat. Then I walked out front and sat on the steps. Same steps where Grandma used to drink coffee in the mornings. Same spot where Kyle once swore he'd never come back. I looked up at the stars just beginning to show themselves in the darkening sky. It wasn't victory I felt, not exactly. It was peace. Sharp-edged, hard-won, a little ugly around the edges. But it was real. Kyle would scream, file appeals, call from jail if he had a chance. But none of that mattered now. The house was safe. Grandma's legacy was intact. And Kyle, well, Kyle had signed his fate with the same pen he thought would make him king. Justice wasn't pretty. It never is. But it didn't need to be. It just needed to be final. And it was. I didn't want the house before. But now that I'd buried the rot, it finally felt like home. Some houses are more than walls and windows. They're memory vaults, battlefields, graves for the lies we bury or dig up. My brother tried to steal more than property. He tried to erase the past and rewrite it in his name. But he forgot one thing. I was watching, and I don't forgive easy. If this story pulled you in and left you wanting more, don't forget to like, share, and comment your thoughts below. Have a family story that went off the rails? Tell us, we're listening. And if you're craving more dark, twisted revenge tales where justice isn't clean but always earned, follow for the next story drop. The past doesn't forget, and neither do we. See you soon in next one.